Hey, my name is Isla Bella. I'm a part of the Steiner Climate Ambassador Internship Program. I'm here with Mariana Gardner, who's another climate ambassador in the program, to talk about food systems and sustainable food growing. So, Mariana, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Mariana Gardner. I am a rising junior at Denison University studying environmental studies. Um, and I just really wanted an opportunity to be outside this summer trying to make a difference in the climate crisis in whatever small ways I could and just learning as much information as I could.
Yeah, and you have a background in landscaping, right?
I do, yeah. Previous to this, I worked in landscaping for, believe it or not, almost like 5 summers. Um, yeah, and so the thing about landscaping is that, if you're not the one in charge, you can't really choose what's being grown, and
Mm,
even if you are, it's up to the client always. And so, the client almost, in my experience, almost like 95% of the time is choosing things that, aren't particularly sustainable. In California, that was a lot of lawns, and I was noticing just the amount of time, money, effort put into lawns is absolutely mind-boggling, especially in a place that has no water most of the time.
mhm.
And so I was like, how can I still be outside, still have my hands in the soil, still be growing things outside of landscaping? And so I wanted to do something like this, and I did.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful. So, with landscaping, did you ever find yourself in like an ethical quandary where like your job was to do something, but you knew that it wasn't particularly sustainable, but you were still like you still had to do it?
Yeah, I mean, like, I didn't let the quandary I wish I could say let the quandary last longer, but I didn't really usually when I started out, I was 17
Mhm.
and in a group of, or I must have been, like, even younger than that, but, and my coworkers were, like, 2 35-year-old men, and my boss was a 65-year-old man, so I was like there was no part of me that was like, "Oh, maybe I won't do what they say." Um, I was very new, everyone had more experience than me, so it was kinda I was just wanted to keep up, that was my main focus.
Yeah,
So,
I get it.
I had
There's
to leave the system completely to start, questioning some things
yeah,
about how sustainable things work.
exactly, 100%. So how has this experience, this internship over the past 6 weeks, shifted your perspectives, opinions, or ideas going forward when it comes to landscaping?
Wow, I think it's more food-based than I initially started out with.
Mm.
Um, I kind of saw sustainable landscaping. I had this next door neighbor named Hal, and he was probably 90 years old. And he just was too old to take care of his garden in the traditional way. And so he had all of these native drought-tolerant plants. There was no lawn, there was just, like, a stone path that kind of winded through it, and it took care of itself, and it was the most beautiful garden I've ever seen. And so I always thought of that as kind of what I thought of as sustainable landscaping. Um, and then I did this project, and I think it's just, we're always aware of food insecurity, but it made me even more aware of food insecurity and realizing, well, if you're gonna spend the time, money, and resources to do something, hopefully you should be feeding someone too. If there's a lack of food, we should make food then. So it shifted the way I thought about it more, not just, sustainable landscaping, but sustainable landscaping that hopefully feeds people.
Mm. And that resonates with me so hard. That's like I mean, of course, it's part of the focus for my nonprofit and social enterprise, but I just remember I used to be very focused on like native plants and that kind of sustainable landscaping, and it has so much value. Like I don't want to discount that, but cities are such a small percentage of the space, the land we have in the United States. So even if we were to like
Mhm.
plant native plants in every lawn in America, it would make a difference. but not as much as if we were growing
Mhm.
our own food and able to transition some agricultural lands back to, like, a protected ecosystem, you know?
Definitely,
Mm,
definitely,
yeah.
definitely, and I think I've started seeing the value in larger plots of lands too. I
Mm.
think that there's a really big difference too between, in San Francisco, you have these postage sized, like postage stamp size, little backyards, and, you can do things with that for sure. But one thing I learned is we had to do everything manually. So we couldn't use modern technology, which taught me how to work hard. Um, but you kind of go through people's houses and any kind of equipment you have to take, you're carrying through, and you get back there, and it's a tiny little piece of land. And so the amount, again, of time, money, and energy you have to put to keep something like that up is a
Mm,
lot. So when I came to Ohio and I see that this church just has over an acre of land that's just for a lawn that's just out there, my mind is blown, and I'm like, "Okay, maybe it's okay." I'm coming up with this kind of right now, but it's okay to have that Howell type of gardens in places like San Francisco where you have a tiny bit of land that kind of it takes care of itself, and maybe where you have random plots of a huge amount of land that we can focus on doing something about that.
mhm.
And using that for food production where we can actually maximize our output. One thing I thought of too, this is something I've always thought of, is like the sides of highways to me are such a waste. Um, I think about how in the world they mow miles and miles and miles and miles of highway in Ohio. I don't think people understand how weird that is. That doesn't happen other places.
And we pay for it.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? So I think taking these large plots of lands that are all lawn and converting them is really important and figuring out the most effective way to do it, not just doing it with every single garden across the board because not that people would, but finding like where are we going to have the best output and deciding to do it there is important.
Yes, and that's become one of my focuses as I've been studying permaculture more and more, just recognizing that there's not like a blueprint that you can just copy and paste onto every different site and yard and ecosystem. Like it's going to vary, and like you said, like for some yards, the like native self-sustaining like setup is probably going to be best, and for others like intensive food production may be best.
Yep.
um, but yeah, I think for me, it was a huge wake up call when I realized that grass, like lawn grass, it is the most. Oh my gosh, sorry, my mind is blinking right now.
No, I
Um,
know what you're trying to say.
you
Isn't it
do?
like our biggest crop in the United States?
Biggest irrigated crop. That's what it is. Yes,
Yeah,
my mind
that
wasn't
was
even thinking of the
shocking.
crop because, like, we don't even eat it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's shocking. That's something I've repeated to a lot of random people I've met to try to help them understand why we care so much for what we're doing. I think that's wild. That's
Hmm.
wild, and it would be wild in a system where we didn't have people who were starving, but it's especially wild in a system where we do.
Yeah, especially when the issue with food insecurity is access. Because I was also talking about this with another intern. We have enough calories. And we talked about this in the program too. There are enough calories in the world. It's about where they're going and it's about the access to them. S-
Yeah, and I think what was really special too about working with the group that we worked with is we got kinda a much broader view on this than we might have, just if we had stayed in our own bubbles. I think, like, in the US, yeah, we have enough calories, but we're working with we had members of our group that were from Nigeria and Kenya and India, and they were telling us about and Antigua,
Mhm.
and yeah, and Shema is from Antigua, and she was telling us about how to remember that there are places like that in the world and that there's not even necessarily enough calories
Well,
too.
I was actually speaking statistically. Like there's
Oh,
enough
really?
calories for the
Oh,
world.
yeah, yeah.
It just
Yeah,
it comes down to what form the calories are in and where they're going, and the inequity with that is just
yeah, 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 definitely, definitely. Yeah, we have enough food in the world. That that gets me too, a lot, and I think it's important for people to understand that there's enough food in the world and it's just about how we distribute it.
Mhm.
So, I'm thinking, like, I'm not quite sure what I wanna do. I can't say when I'm grown up anymore because 'cause I'm not sure, like, when that line is of when I'm fully grown up, but
Mm.
what I wanna do eventually, but, thinking about doing something maybe in distribution. If the problem isn't that we don't have enough food, but it's how it's distributed, then, um, how do you kinda remake that system so that it does get
Exactly.
distributed correctly?
Yeah, and I feel like distribution so often falls off of the radar because it's not, like, the sexiest topic when we're talking about food insecurity. Like,
Right.
I feel like people wanna, like, straight go to, like, gardens and food pantries and, like, food
Mm,
production, but,
yeah.
yeah, when distribution is such an issue, like, we need people who understand the issue to be working with that and working with communities
Yeah.
directly.
Yep. 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 I
So
think I Oh, yeah, sorry, no.
no, go ahead. I was gonna ask you a different question, but I wanna hear what you have to say.
Yeah, kind of along those lines, I just remember Maureen telling us about how she was telling us about how, like, the education system is different, in Kenya, and she was like, "Well, people are just much sweeter here," and I'm like, what do you mean?" Like, across the world, I'm sure you have nice people, you have not nice people, sweet people, not sweet people,
Mm.
and she was like, "Well, a lot of people, you know, grow up in hunger, and it can make people bitter," and I was just like, I didn't even consider that as, like, a reason for why someone might not wanna be sweet, and, like, that's a very valid reason for not wanting to be sweet too if you're really hungry, but,
Mhm.
uh, yeah, I don't know, it definitely made me rethink the way that we look at food, um, completely. But yeah, go on, what were you about to say?
I'm wondering, if you have a favorite site that we visited in the internship or perhaps just a favorite part of the internship?
Hmm. I was just talking to my dad about how much I liked, going to see, like, the honey production at, Central State. I think we were all really tired, we'd all done a lot of, like, manual labor, we were at the end of our, like, mental capacities, and all of a sudden we just went to the honey place and everything changed.
Uh-huh.
It was so exciting to see what they were doing. The honey was so sweet and so delicious and, like, mind altering. We all, like, went from being, groggy to being, like, on a sugar rush. Uh, it was that was pretty amazing. That was a really fun moment, getting to, like, uncap the or you got to uncap the honeycomb
Mm,
and, learning about raw honey and how all the bees, like, they get a lot of the things that are allergens in the air, in the local air, and then if you have it, it's like giving yourself a little it's like how vaccines work. You give yourself a little bit, your body knows how to react, and then when it has a lot of it, it doesn't react so bad.
mhm,
So, in my whole life, my dad's had pretty bad allergies, and so I was like, "Oh, like, this would have been such a cool thing." And he
mhm,
was telling me that his have more to do with, like, mites and things bees don't control, but it could make a big difference for people who have allergies that are just based on, like, pollen.
mhm.
That was so cool to learn about.
Oh my gosh, it was such a cool site, and I'm this is very not in line with the rest of my personality, but when it comes to most insects, I get really squeamish. But we were in there and there were bees like flying around and we were tasting the honey and we were talking with each other. And somehow I walked out of there not feeling scared. And it was just like
For
the most
that.
yeah, it was the most mind-blowing experience to me because I'm always like, if there's a bee near me, I'll like freeze up. But when I walked out of there and I just saw them like buzzing around the flowers, it was like I had a different appreciation, almost like seeing what they were able to create. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think we learned something like I don't wanna spread false facts, but, like, the bees create a really small amount of honey. Each bee I'd have to look this up.
Mhm.
Maybe, like, a teaspoon or less makes that much honey.
I remember him saying a teaspoon. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, hopefully teaspoon is right. But it gave me a appreciation. He was like, "That's why you can't waste anything, because a bee spent its whole life making you that little teaspoon, and so to even, like, not wipe out the insides of it totally and you're, only losing a couple teaspoons, but the bees spent, like, many, many bees spent their whole lives just to produce that much honey.
Mhm.
So, yeah, that also gave me a new appreciation for trying not to waste things for sure, which I already feel like I try really hard not to, so I was like, "Wow, it's amazing."
Yeah, for real, like, I took a bite of the honeycomb and I was like, "This is a bee's entire life's work right now." So, it really does give you a different appreciation.
Yeah.
Um, Another question for you about the internship. Was there a particular learning perhaps that has really stuck with you during these 6 weeks?
Oh, wow. There's just so many different things that we've learned. I think in terms of hands-on, I really like the idea of the lasagna method for gardening, um, which is basically you put down, like, some straw and then some cardboard and then some straw, and you can kinda try to, like, clamp it down somehow, whether that's with, like, stakes or rocks or something, and that kind of helps the soil underneath develop,
Mhm.
and I like that because it's something anyone can do. Like, you don't have to I mean, like, there's just so much cardboard out there in the world, you can take it from someone's recycling bin, they won't care. Like, this is basically a no money option to be able to do something, and I feel like so often money is a barrier, not just for people who don't have it, but for trying to start a project for something, I get that response so much, "Well, oh, it'll cost so much," like, trying to start something at my own school, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so my mentality in the past 2 years at school has been like, "Well, I'm gonna figure out how to do it with no money then." And people don't have anything to say to that. There's just like no comeback to that. And so I want more people to be able to do that, to take that kind of barrier away from getting sustainable projects started, growing your own food yourself. So
Mhm.
I just love that there's a method like that out there that actually works too.
Mhm.
um, Anyone can do. We all did it, and most of us didn't have any farming experience, so yeah, we can all go out there and do the lasagna method and make our soil better, so yeah, I like
Yeah,
that.
absolutely, and it makes me think about I feel like we label cities as, like, worse in terms of, like, food production than more suburban, rural areas that have more land available, but I feel like people don't necessarily recognize at first how nutrient dense cities are, in the sense that, like, there's a dumpster up the street where I could probably get a bunch of stuff to go put in my compost. I've gone, like,
Mhm.
recycling diving to go get cardboard, like you said. I've
Uh-huh.
driven around the back of, like, a random paint store and found a bunch of pallets that one
Mhm.
can deconstruct to make a ton of garden stuff out of. So,
Yeah.
cities are just so rich in these resources as long as we know how to go out and find them and utilize them and trade for them and all of that. Um,
Yeah, it's a
oh, and
great
then also the garden designer in me wants to add, for those of you who wanna try the lasagna method at home, to make sure, number 1, that you take the plastic, tape and labels off of the cardboard to make sure that doesn't get into your soil, and then also make sure that you add layers of, like, green materials, like perhaps
Oh,
kitchen
yes.
compost or grass clippings, so that, there's a good balance of nitrogen and carbon so it can break down better.
It's
So
very important. I
mm.
did forget that aspect.
Well,
Yeah.
either way, it would still be a nice little blanket on the soil, so
Yes, definitely.
mm. Okay, another question. What advice do you have for perhaps a future Steiner climate ambassador or just anybody who's within this sphere?
I would say specifically to the future climate ambassadors, enjoy it, just enjoy it. 'Cause going in, I was nervous about it. I was like, "I don't know what this will entail, or how good at it I'll be, or how I'll get along with other people," like, all these different things swimming in my head. Um, but it's awesome, and it's awesome just because of how it's set up.
Mhm,
Um, I think just having other people around my age, and some of them not my age, but young people in general who care about what I care about, and what you'll care about as a climate ambassador, which is obviously trying to help the climate crisis. Or not help the climate crisis, or fight against the climate crisis. A big difference. That inherently is a lot of fun. It's kind of like you find your people in a way. And
Mhm.
so um enjoy being with those people and getting the energy off of those people and working with them and making connections and making with connections with all the people you meet. That's what I would recommend to future climate ambassadors for sure.
That's an amazing piece of advice. Do you also have advice that you'd like to give to people who are just working with food access, food security, and environmental justice?
Yeah, I actually think it's kind of along the same route. It's like there's always more that you can do,
Mm.
especially when it comes to food access, you know? Always. There's always something more you can do. And so, are you okay? Sorry. There's always something more that you can do. Um, and so that can make you, I think, eventually really burnt out. And I've seen a lot of people who do get really burnt out by it. Um, and so I think enjoying what you're actually doing has to be a big part of it.
Mhm.
Or else at some point you're just not going to be able to do it anymore. And everything's important along the way. So while you're trying to provide food access for other people, you got to make sure you're getting your own good food and good nutrients. And like I said, that you're liking what you're doing as you're doing it. And as long as you have that, you can work on providing food access for people for a really long time and be super effective at it.
Mm.
Um, but I think that's like something that goes like unlistened to, and I think it's easy to get in the mindset that, oh, I'm never doing enough. And I think there's so many traps within that. So
Mm.
that's what I would recommend for people to do. Figure out how to make it sustainable. Not just sustainable like green, but sustainable for you.
Wow, that just really hit me, and I feel like I needed to hear that, and I hope that reaches a lot of other people who need to hear that too, because I think there's a lot of people who do fall victim to that mindset from time to time. So, I'm going to let you go in just a moment, but before I do, I want to check in and see if there's anything else you want to say about this environmental and food justice sphere in general, or the Climate Ambassador Program, or your plans going forward. Anything else you'd like to share?
Hmm. Huh. I would say I I do actually think I have one thing to say. I think for the climate ambassador program, I really enjoyed meeting all of the people that we met. And I think they were all really important people to meet. And I also think there was kind of an attitude that big agriculture is like, our enemy collectively. Um, and I'm not sure if it's good to have an enemy you never meet. I think it would have been really beneficial to maybe visit some people who are in big agriculture and understand why they're doing what they're doing and what their reasoning is.
Mhm.
I'm not saying that I think they're right, like, in that, that's the way to go. I think there must be some benefits to agriculture on a large scale, and I think it would have been really beneficial for us to figure out how to learn about them. Um, so yeah, that's my 2 cents. But
Yeah.
other than that, it was incredible, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat.
That's so wonderful, and I'm sorry if I seem distracted. I just had to write down what you said. I'm not sure if it's good to have an enemy you never meet. That was just, like, an incredible quote, and I needed to
I
capture it, so
appreciate that, thank you.
yeah, absolutely. So, thank you so much for your time, and I really look forward to staying in touch and seeing everything that we do going forward.
Definitely, we all have to meet up. We all like each other too much to not meet up.
This is
Yeah,
true. Thank you,
yeah.
Mariana.
Alright, have a nice day. Bye.
Bye.